Hello there, BookTube. My name is Daniel. Welcome back to my channel, Guilty Feet. Scrambled eggs. Scramble, scramble, scrambled, and I've got no rhythm. And today I'm going to do a tag. This is the Fab Four Tag that was originated by Tom LA Books and is much more my speed than his amazing set of videos about the Divine Comedy. I was tagged in this by Gina Stania at Gina Stania Books. So thank you very much, Gina, because I'd seen this tag on Brian at Booksh's channel and really liked it and said I was going to do it. And then I just noticed today that I'd been tagged, so I have an excuse to do it. Love the Fab Four. I have read several books about the Beatles and by the Beatles. And so, for example, I've got this illustrated lyrics, which was originally published in 2 parts, edited by Alan Aldridge, with or lyrics of all the songs, well, mostly the Lennon and McCartney songs, rather than George Harrison, with some very dodgy images in it, and some great stuff, some photography, some of which David Bailey, I understand, did, and these great images. This was there was a copy of this floating around when I was younger, a paperback copy, which I think had the guitar chords, but this is the actual, just the lyrics, and this is something I visit with my kids very often, where they'll just pick a song randomly and I will show them that I know the song and most of the lyrics to it. So that's a Beatles book. I've got also Bill Harry, who's the doyen, somebody who wrote a lot of Beatles books. This is his book of Beatles list, which I had when I was young, which is just full of great bits of the Beatles in Europe, where it's just little snippets, books about the Beatles, the Hamburg clubs that they played in, a list of all sorts of fun stuff. So that's the book of Beatles list. And this I think was one of the first books that I got. This is The Love You Make, written by Peter Brown. Peter Brown is name-checked in The Ballad of John and Yoko, which was #1 in the UK. Beatles' last of 17 #1s was #1 the day I was born in the UK. And this was his inside story that came out. This is not very well loved to remember, but it was the Beatles book du jour. And my parents bought it for me, and there's a note from my mother giving it to me for Hanukkah in 1983, when I would have been about 14. So yeah, I was a Beatles kid. And that's just sort of my bona fides. Let's look at the prompts. #1, I just fell out of bed, found out what key I dreamed it in, and played it. Paul McCartney about yesterday. A book that you dreamed about or that inspired one of your dreams. Okay, I've got here T. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom, which I read many years ago. I picked up. This is a great quote. Look how beaten up this was sellotape. I picked up secondhand like that with all the sellotape on it. I certainly didn't fix it up. And you can see I bought this in December 1993 for £1. That would have been from 2J's Bookshop in Edgware. I don't know why I thought I should read T. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom. I don't think I've ever sat all the way through the David Lean movie, Lawrence of Arabia, but I had this had been on my radar, and I saw it, and I said, right, I'm going to read T. Lawrence's 7 Pillars of Wisdom. And I remember vividly how this impacted and seeped into my dreams, and for several nights I was dreaming of being on a camel in the desert, and it was very evocative, and it faded soon after I finished reading it, but I certainly remember when I was looking for an answer to this prompt, this one stays in my mind as something that actually invaded my dreams. 2, Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, John Lennon, by John Lennon, well, Lennon McCartney, but yes, I guess Lennon wrote most of it. A book that talks about drugs, or that was written under the influence of drugs. A book not spoken about a lot, but just a tremendous book. And this is the Basketball Diaries, and this is together with the Book of Nods by Jim Carroll. Basketball Diaries was made into a movie, a very good movie, early Leonardo DiCaprio movie, and Jim Carroll had been a heroin addict. He'd been a high school basketball player who then got addicted to heroin, and this book is written I think after his recovery, and he became then an advocate for recovery from drug abuse. The movie is terrifying in its depiction of the horrors of addiction, and there's just a harrowing scene when Jim Carroll, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, goes back, tries to go home, and his mother's locked the door from the inside, and he's sobbing outside because he's got nowhere to go, and he just wants some money, and she knows that she can't let him in or give in to him because it's just going to feed his addiction. Heartbreaking and as I say, harrowing. And the book, I think, so I came to the book because of the movie, and the book is outstanding, and it's a diary, and it's about the highs and the lows, and then the recovery. So I highly recommend that if you can pick up a copy, if you're interested at all in that sort of culture, the 60s drug culture. That is The Basketball Diaries by Jim Carroll. In this case, this was published with the Book of Nods, which I think is just sort of short fiction and stuff that he'd written. Prompt number 3. My phone's gone off. 1 second. Here we go. We thought we'd be really big in Liverpool, Ringo Starr. A book about someone who had far more success than what they expected, or a book that was much more successful than what the author had expected. Not sure if this is a great answer to this prompt, but I thought I would pick. This is Bone. This is the first volume of Bone. The Bone story by Jeff Smith, and this was published by Cartoon Books, as was the original comic book series. If you're not familiar with Bone, he's a character. There he is, Bone, on the cover. Phone Bone, as phone Phone, as opposed to his cousin Phony Bone, Phoney. This is a story about these characters. The whole thing is told in very simple black and white pencils, and this is a collection of the first 6 issues, which were put out by this independent. Cartoon Books was a studio which published nothing but Jeff Smith. It was created to publish his work, and I think by issue 20 it had become so popular that they moved to Image Comics, which is still not one of the big 2, but at the time was a big deal, and then eventually went back to Cartoon Books. And this is the first collection that was published by Cartoon Books. This may be the second or third. It says reprinted. So this was put out in August 1993 was the first printing, and this is stamped, reprinted December 93 and February 94. So this is early on, still under the. Later on, I don't know. I've got them in the room. I've got the whole set. Later on, they were had bigger publishers, and since then they've been reprinted in color, and they were taken up by Scholastic in the US and by I don't know who does it in the UK, and they've printed several times and become a mainstay of young adult early reader literature. There's 9 volumes, and then there are other bits and pieces, stories told by other people. But the original Jeff Smith, this is volume 1 of the Complete Bone Adventures. There were no expectations. This is, an independent comic. And it didn't sell very many. I think that first issue, I have like an 8th printing of it, because as word of mouth took it, as you could do in the early 90s before the internet, it required word of mouth to say, this is really good. Have you read this? This is something worth catching up. So they kept reprinting it to meet demand. So I've got I have an 8th printing of issue 1, and then sort of 7th and 6th and 5th printings of the single digit issues, and then after that they started printing enough for the people who were interested in collecting comics to read them. But the first sort of 12 issues leading up to the Great Cow Race are among the funniest and best comic writing I've ever read, and that, I think, was an unexpected surprise, I guess. Number 4, sitting on a cornflake waiting for the man to come. From I'm the Walrus, of course. A surreal book, or a book with some surreal elements that you enjoyed. Well, I thought it appropriate, if we're already going to talk about this, that we talk about John Lennon's own writing. This is a bind-up of the 2 books that Lennon put out in the 60s. The first one was John Lennon in his own right, and the second one was A Spaniard in the Works. And I pored over these when I was a teenager. Me and another friend who were big Beatles fans used these as absolute Bibles of silliness and surreality. I'll read a little bit. I'm just going to pause to get my glasses, and then I'll read a little bit to give you an example of what I mean. So this is from Lennon's first book in his own right, and this is a chapter called Alec Speaking. He is putting it lithely when he says, quabble in the grass, strappy down the soddy flays, a moamat a mass, a monk a mink a minibus, a marmalady moon, a mickey mendip multiplus, a mighty midgy spoon. And so I traddled onward, caring not a care. Onward, 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 my friends, to victory and glory for the 39th. That is Alec Speaking, and there's a drawing. So it's full of weird sketches and funny stuff, and Lennon's scribbles, and this was partly my introduction. I think very heavily influenced, I guess, by Lewis Carroll, and the second one was called A Spaniard in the Works. In case you didn't understand what I was calling it, and that, I think, was a big influence on me, and I have sketchbooks full of paragraphs that I wrote, which are deeply derivative of this, which is already derivative of something else. Okay, The White Album, a book you loved that has a minimalist cover or is written in a minimalist style. I picked up 3 books here because the author refused, I think, at one point to approve new covers for these books. Famously, A Catcher in the Rye was never been reprinted without that original cover, and I've got here these editions of For Esme with Love and Squalor. I have this lovely old penguin of Raise High the Roof Beams and Seymour in Introduction, and then Super Minimalist, Franny and Zooey. And those are my J.D. Salinger books that I read 30 years ago and love them to this day. Minimalist covers, maximalist insides. Okay, Little Darling, It's Been a Long, Cold, Lonely Winter, Here Comes the Sun, a book of poetry that you find uplifting. And I picked out You Took the Last Bus Home by Brian Bilston, who's a Twitter poet. His identity is unknown, although I think I figured out who he really is. And if anyone would like to know, send me an email and I'll tell you what I've written to the person I think it is, and I've written to the publishers and said, this is who I think Brian Bilston really is, and they've blown me off. But I think I don't know. I think I've worked it out. But it's supposed to be a mystery who Brian Bilston really is. But he puts his poems up on Twitter. He's a great follow. And this was a collection that was published by Unbound. Has since been published by a major Unbound's an independent publisher that does it's a friend sourced. You raise the money yourself and then you publish the book. But since then he's been taken on by major publishers. And this is his poem, the titular poem from the collection You Took the Last Bus Home. To give you an example, you took the last bus home. Don't know how you got it through the door. You're always doing amazing stuff, like the time you caught the train. That's some of it lightweight and fun like that. Some of it with a little more weight to it. But that's an uplifting poetry collection, You Took the Last Bus Home by Brian Bilston. Next up, A Day in the Life, an experimental book that's very uncommon for its content or format, and yet it works well. So I've had experiences with experimental works that didn't work so well for me, so I thought, I'm shoehorning this in just to get another Beatles book in, but an important one. This is Revolution in the Head by the late Ian MacDonald. I think originally published in, one second, I'll tell you exactly. Originally published in 94, maybe? Yes, originally published in 1994. This goes song by song in chronological order of the songs that the Beatles recorded, and gives a description of how they recorded and what the motivation behind it was, maybe whether it's lyrical or musical part of it, who played what. If one part was George Martin had come up with the piano riff in the middle or whatever it was, it goes into detail for each song. So there's around 150 entries here for all the recorded Beatles songs. Well, I'll tell you exactly how many, more than 150. Going up, goes all the way up to the last recording, which is I Me Mine, from the Let It Be album, the Harrison song, which is 186. Just a solid, thorough intellectual reckoning with the songs. You don't have to agree with everything MacDonald says, but as a reference work, you can dip into it, as I do occasionally when a song comes up and I want to go back and say, well, let's see what MacDonald had to say about that, or what does it mean. What my daughter asked me the other day, who is Michelle? Well, she was looking at the lyric book, and the song Michelle, Soleillement qui vont très bien ensemble, and she wanted to know who Michelle was, and we went back here and didn't have an answer in that instance, but described the origins of the song, who wrote the most of it, who wrote the middle eight, etc., etc. And it's a great reference work, but also just as a bloody good read if you're a fan of the Beatles. So I guess it's an unusual format because it's song by song, but as I say, shoehorned it in a little bit. Next, over half of Americans who are over 45 and older attribute the Beatles split to Yoko Ono, a book about a woman, or if you can't think of one, a man who is unjustly blamed or accused of something. Back to a novel. I don't think we've had many novels so far. There's been a lot of, apart from there's the Salinger stuff, there's been a lot of non-fiction and stuff. Fingersmith, great romp of a Victorian story about with twists and turns. Somebody ends up in an asylum. There is a plot. There is a twist in the plot. People are not who they say they are. People are not even who they think they are. And just terrifically pacey, rompy, sexy, fun story by Sarah Waters. I highly recommend Fingersmith. Don't want to spoil any more than that. But definitely worth your time. And yes, people are wronged and escaped and go back in, and what's terrific. Next one, Limitless Undying Love, which shines around me like a million suns and calls me on and on across the universe. A book that opened your mind and made you think of the universe in a new way, physically or spiritually. Well, I had read a book by Richard Dawkins and was fairly persuaded into atheism by that. And I wrote about what an impact that had on me. And my brother immediately went out and bought this for me and gave this to me as a present, hoping to sort of bring back. And this is the great partnership: science, religion, and the search for meaning, by Rabbi Dr. Jonathan Sacks, the late former chief rabbi of the UK and the Commonwealth, and an all-round super chap. He was a philosopher. I think he studied philosophy at Cambridge. He was a man of the world, not a man who spent his life studying in Shiva. His son was a couple of years below me in school, so I knew I think his son married a cousin of mine. Could have got that. Someone knows this. I've had this conversation before. I know who he married. I think she's a cousin of mine. Anyway, his son was when I took youth camps, his son was one of my kids. Jolly nice chap, by all accounts. So I didn't know Lord Sacks very well, although I have plenty of friends who worked with him and knew him. But just in terms of as a humanitarian, as a writer, a philosopher, he is an unparalleled mind in my experience. I'm not going to push this on anybody. I think it has. I think the conversation about whether science and religion contradict or can coexist, I think transcends Judaism, or the practice of Judaism. So it's just always an interesting read. There's lots of his other books which I haven't read, and people read a lot more about Rabbi Sacks than I have, and still refer back to his weekly teachings and writings about Judaism. But this was super moving and spiritually valuable for me. Last one, number 10. Mother Mary comes to me speaking words of wisdom. Let it be a book that you found powerful and moving despite its apparent simplicity. And I've just picked up here Michael Rosen's sad book, illustrated by Quentin Blake. If it's not obvious from, it says it there, but it's not obvious from the pictures. And this is a book about how sometimes the author gets sad. And the reason for his sadness is that he lost a child very suddenly, age 18. And it's about grief, and it's about managing sadness, and it's not about necessarily overcoming it and defeating it, but it's about accepting that it's part of your life. Sad book by Michael Rosen, and that I think is enough, right? That's the Fab Four Tag. Tom, when he created the tag, tagged a whole bunch of people, and I don't think they've all done it yet. So I re-tag all the people Tom tagged, because I'm dying to see Steve Donoghue and Hannah and a whole bunch of people take this on. And that's it. Thank you very much. Bye.